Welcome to the second season of Tech and AI. Enjoy the episode, and please subscribe. Thank you.
So all the headlines are flashing, right? AI regulation is here.
They're everywhere.
But if you're, I don't know, actually working in product or trying to set a budget for compliance or even managing critical infrastructure.
Yeah.
That big sweeping headline is, well, it's basically useless. It doesn't tell you what to do tomorrow.
Exactly. We need to move past the idea of regulation and look at the real dates.
Yeah, the real compliance dates, where the financial risks are.
Yeah.
And, who on your team needs to own what.
And that's the whole point of this deep dive. We're trying to provide a clear roadmap for 2025. We've gone through a huge stack of material. Laws, executive orders, national strategies, even binding treaties.
So those aren't just summarizing the legalese. We're going to get into who regulates what, the actual timelines for the next 18 months. And I think most importantly, we're giving you a 5-step playbook that, your legal, security, product, and exec teams can actually start using this week.
Right. We want to turn all this density into clarity. Our roadmap starts with the global anchor, which is the EU AI Act. Then we'll pivot to the US, which is a much more layered policy stack. And finally, we'll zoom out and look at the strategies emerging from the global south.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
If we're talking about global standards, we have to start in Europe. What's the single biggest misconception about the EU AI Act timeline that you see right now?
The biggest one, by far, is people believing they have until 2026.
Which is when the big high-risk rules land.
Exactly. But the EU AI Act is already in force. It was published in July 2024, so the compliance clock actually started ticking back in August 2024. This phased approach it's critical for budget planning.
So what applies first? What are the immediate non-negotiable duties for 2025?
Okay, so first up are the total prohibitions. These are the AI systems that are just deemed unacceptable because they manipulate people or threaten fundamental rights.
Things like social scoring by governments.
Right, or using subliminal techniques to distort behavior. Those duties apply earliest. Then, the rules for general purpose AI, or GPAI, they start phasing in throughout 2025.
And just to be clear, that means if you're building a large language model, even if you're not based in the EU, if you offer it to the EU, you have duties coming due now.
You absolutely do. Documentation and transparency duties.
Wow. So if you touch medical devices, critical infrastructure, hiring platforms, education tools, or if you ship GPAI models, your 2025 planning cycle needs dedicated budget and assigned owners, like right now.
Yes. We're not talking about just drafting a memo. We're talking about generating actual technical evidence.
And the European Commission seems to be sticking to its guns on this, right?
Oh, absolutely. They have been very firm, publicly maintaining the schedule despite a lot of lobbying for delays. And that certainty, that refusal to bend the timeline is what's forcing businesses to prioritize.
I've heard some talk about a voluntary code of practice for GPAI. Can teams just wait for that to come out?
No, absolutely not. That is a huge mistake. A voluntary code is expected maybe late 2025, but it's meant to complement, not replace, the mandatory duties.
So if you wait, you're behind.
You'll be scrambling to backfill required documentation and model evals, which is just a massive budgetary drain. You have to start now.
So practically speaking, where should a compliance lead go this week? What's the single source of truth?
They should immediately bookmark the official EU guidance pages. That's the hub. It has the actual text of the act, info on the new EU AI office, and all the implementation notes. That's your Bible for the EU market.
Okay. Now let's move across the Atlantic, because the U.S. regulatory landscape is, well, it's a complete departure. You called it a layered policy stack.
It is. The key operational difference is complexity and fragmentation. It's less of a highway and more of a
spaghetti junction.
Exactly, a spaghetti junction of rules. There's no single omnibus federal law. Instead, you have layers. The Presidential Executive Order, OMB guidance, agency-specific rules, and, of course, state laws popping up.
So the U.S. is regulating more through its checkbook, through procurement standards, instead of one big mandate. So if you sell to the federal government, what was the big change in 2025?
The big pivot was the OMB guidance, the Office of Management and Budget. In April 2025, they issued a memo, M2521.
Wait, M2521? I thought it was M2410.
It was. They replaced it. And that rapid revision tells you just how fast the federal government is moving on this.
That is fast. So what did they tighten up specifically?
They significantly tightened how federal agencies must govern and report on their own AI use. Things like mandatory inventories of high-risk systems, more transparency on how they assess risk.
Which means if you're a vendor selling to, say, the Department of Energy, you have to align with these federal baselines.
You have to. Your internal compliance has to track this document even if you don't sell directly to the government because it sets the standard.
With this decentralized structure federal memos here, agency rules there, is there a common language teams can use, something to standardize their controls and documentation?
Yes, and this is the strategic shortcut. It's the NIST AI Risk Management Framework, the RMF.
NIST isn't a regulator, though.
They're not, but their framework is the common language that nearly every federal agency points to. If you use the NIST AI RMF principles, mapping risks, defining controls, documenting evals, you save a massive amount of rework. You're already speaking their language.
So the NIST RMF is basically the Rosetta Stone for U.S. compliance.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk states. Lots of bills are flying around, but where are the obligations about to become real?
Colorado is the place to watch. Its Artificial Intelligence Act is already on the books. It targets high-risk AI and algorithmic discrimination.
And it's important because it puts duties on both the vendors and the companies using the AI, right?
Correct. Both have duties. Things like mandated risk management, notices to consumers, impact assessments.
And when does that kick in?
The main obligations kick in 2026, but the planning and some smaller pieces are active now in 2025, things like annual bias monitoring. It's really a preview of what we're going to see in other states.
Okay, so we have the EU setting the global standard, the U.S. regulating with its checkbook in states. Let's zoom out now, beyond these powers. Let's talk about global convergence.
Right. And if we're talking global governance, the biggest step is the Council of Europe Framework Convention on AI. It opened for signature on September 5, 2024.
And this is a big deal because it's not just a recommendation. It's the first binding international AI treaty. How does anchoring this in human rights change the game for a global company?
It changes the DNA of the regulation. It basically codifies human rights, democracy, and rule of law into AI governance. And while it complements EU law, its reach is much broader because non-EU states can sign it. The U.S. could sign it.
So you could see procurement clauses in big multinational contracts start to reference this directly.
You should expect to see that. It'll affect everything from data processing to necessity and proportionality.
And that brings us to the Global South. I think the assumption is often that regulation there is years away.
That assumption is wrong. And it's a huge compliance red flag. We are seeing incredibly fast action. Brazil is probably the furthest along legislatively. The Senate approved their big bill, PL 2338-2023, in December 2024.
And that bill is significant because?
Because it's comprehensive, and it draws heavily from the EU's risk-based framework. It's now before their Chamber of Deputies. If you operate in Brazil, you need to be watching this daily.
What about Africa? What's the approach there?
The African Union adopted a continental AI strategy in July 2024. Now, it's non-binding, but it's a crucial North Star. It guides member states on ethics, investment, and capacity building. It's the shared foundation they'll build on.
And we're seeing that foundation turn into actual national plans like in Kenya.
Correct. Kenya released a national AI strategy for 2025 to 2030 back in March. And this document, it frames their entire approach to R&D, skills, and governance. So even if a specific bill is still in the works, this strategy matters now for procurement and government pilot projects.
And what about a major player like India?
India's new AI governance guidelines are expected later in 2025. Their approach is what they call techno-legal. It emphasizes safety and accountability, but the idea is that sectoral regulators in finance, health, and so on will use these guidelines as a framework to build their own specific rules.
Okay, this is the pivotal question then. We've got detailed EU rules, a layered U.S. system, global strategies. How does a product team translate this global sprawl into one clear, executable playbook?
We synthesize it down into 5 core steps, and the idea is to use the common threads across all these regimes to just minimize friction.
They do. It's the most essential step. You have to accurately figure out your risk profile. Are you a GPAI provider? Are you a high-risk deployer in hiring or healthcare? Or are you a low-risk use case? Then you map the corresponding layers, EU duties, U.S. state laws, and so on.
Step 2 is about choosing that foundation. This is where we save time.
This is where you save a ton of budget. Adopt the NIST AI RMF as your control baseline. That lets you create common documentation, like model cards, data sheets.
Exactly. Model cards, data sheets, red team reports, incident logs, all stuff that can be reused across the EU for U.S. federal buyers and for states. It avoids bespoke compliance hell.
Right. A model card is just like a safety sheet for a chemical, basically.
Yeah.
Describes what it's for, what its limits are. This documentation is key.
It is. So step 3 is defining the who and the when. Assign DRIs, directly responsible individuals. Compliance is not just a legal team job.
It's cross-functional.
Completely. You need owners for the 2025 deadlines like EU GPAI and distinct owners for the 2026 obligations like the high-risk EU rules and the Colorado law.
Okay, step 4 gets into the supply chain. If you're using third-party models, your risk just explodes.
It does. You have to update your vendor contracts now. Mandate guarantees on data provenance. Where did the training data come from? Include IP warranties. Make sure you have access to test the model yourself. Clauses for red teaming and mandatory disclosures, especially for EU sales.
You need to be indemnified if their model fails.
You absolutely do. And then the final step, step 5, addresses the human factor, which is at the heart of almost every law. For sensitive uses, hiring, education, health, you have to define clear human override paths, documented appeal routes for people, and robust bias monitoring. When regulators audit, they're looking for quantifiable rights impacts. A functional human-in-the-loop system is the best control you can show them.
That is an incredibly clear plan. But where do teams usually trip up? What are the big red flags they should be watching for?
The first one we already touched on, delay. Do not wait for that voluntary code of practice from the EU. The mandatory deadlines are set. You have to build your documentation now.
The second one I see all the time, call it pilot purgatory, focusing only on great demos.
Yes. Laws require operationalized controls, not just a slick prototype. Your bias monitoring, your incident logging, your human override, it all has to be integrated into your actual operational systems. A PowerPoint deck doesn't pass an audit.
And the third red flag, I'm guessing it has to do with data?
It's data hoarding, this idea that you should collect extra data for some future AI project. Both the Council of Europe Treaty and EU law require necessity and proportionality. Extra data without a clear purpose is now a significant compliance risk, not an asset.
Okay, let's nail this down. A final, essential checklist. What are the concrete artifacts a team needs to have by, say, Q2 2025?
On governance, name an AI lead, charter a cross-functional board with legal, product, and security, and publish clear policies on use, red teaming, and incident response.
And on the artifact side, the documents that will survive an audit.
You need to be creating model cards, comprehensive data sheets for your training data, clear evaluation plans, and specific auditable bias and robustness reports. These are your pieces of evidence.
And for risk and assurance, what kind of drills should teams be running?
Adopt the NIST AI RMF principles. Define clear gates for high-risk deployments. You need to be penetration testing your prompts and guardrails, tracking incidents, and this is crucial, rehearsing human override drills so the process actually works when something goes wrong.
So to summarize the timeline one last time.
Q1 to Q2 2025. Mandatory GPAI doc prep time. Do your EU and Colorado gap analysis now, late 2025, adjust to any EU code of practice, and refresh your model inventories. And then 2026. That's go time for the high-risk EU obligations and the Colorado law.
Perfect. Let's do a quick fire myth busting. Myth 1. We're based in the U.S., the EU AI Act is someone else's problem.
Reality. If you offer AI system in the EU or process data from EU users, the Act applies. Its reach is broad. Plan for it.
Myth 2. The U.S. system is a mess. We'll just wait for a single federal law.
Reality. The U.S. is multi-layered. Following the NIST AI RMF now saves you massive rework later because federal and state buyers all speak that language. Waiting is a recipe for disaster.
Last one. Myth 3. The Global South is years away. We don't need to budget for it.
Reality. Brazil's bill, the strategies from the African Union, Kenya, India, they're all moving fast. Procurement and pilot projects will reference these guidelines immediately. There are operational requirements in 2025.
This has been so helpful in turning those confusing headlines into clear operational steps. I think the big takeaway is that regulation isn't the enemy of innovation. It's really the design brief for building reliable systems. By building that evidence using baselines like NIST, your roadmap survives audits, and it's built on a much more robust foundation.
And, we've talked about how countries like Kenya and India are prioritizing AI strategies over just instant heavy laws. So here's a final thought to leave with you. If regulation really is a design brief, how can your organization use this window right now to actively co-design pilot governance frameworks with those regulators to shape the next wave of compliance instead of just reacting to it? That's something to think about as you build your 2025 plans.